The city of Carthage was a metropolis of its time. With a cosmopolitan population of around 750,000 souls and the riches of a vast empire at its fingertips, this African city would have rivaled Rome in its prime. Sadly, much of this history is lost to us. But in this video, we will bring you back in time to visit this lost treasure, from its gargantuan triple walls, to its massive naval harbor, its Edenic garden district, its bustling acropolis, and more. So today, let us step inside the walls of ancient Carthage. One of the advantages of being an adult is that we own the wallets and we make the rules. Now for me, that honestly manifests as basically snacking all day, having my guilty pleasure cereals at midnight or later, but it definitely comes with a sense of guilt when I know just how much sugar is packed into these things. Now, thankfully and amazingly, today's sponsor actually has a solution for my, and I'm sure your problem. Magic Spoon provides a modern twist on the Saturday morning cartoon meal by upgrading it for the 21st century consumer. Each bowl tastes like how you remember, but gets rid of the junk. It's packed with high protein, has 0 grams of sugar, and uses just 4 to 5 net grams of carbs in each serving. What's more, it comes in a variety pack with 4 delicious flavors of fruity, frosted, cocoa, and peanut butter. Magic Spoon fits a variety of lifestyles with its high protein, keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, wheat-free, and naturally flavored cereal. It's a product I can honestly say I love, and I'm so happy that this is actually a thing. Click the link below to grab a variety pack and try it today, and be sure to use the promo code Invicta at checkout to get $5 off any order, or go to magicspoon.com/Invicta. Magic Spoon is actually so confident in their product that they offer a 100% happiness guarantee, which means that if you don't like it for any reason, you can return it for a refund, no questions asked. So click the link below and use the code Invicta for $5 off, or go to magicspoon.com/Invicta to save $5 today. Enjoy! While the city of Carthage would eventually emerge as one of the grandest of its age, it certainly had humble beginnings. According to legend, this began in 814 BC, when Dido and her Phoenician entourage from Tyre established a colony on a promontory jutting out from the African coast. It was an ideal, strategic location at the hub of Mediterranean trade routes with defensible terrain in the form of a series of hills and surrounding shores. The only problem was that Hannibal, a local African king, controlled the land. According to tradition, when Dido requested the land for a city, Hannibal laughed at her and told her mockingly that she could found her city on whatever land she could cover with an ox hide. Dido, in a show of Punic craftiness, then cut the ox hide into thin strips, which she used to outline a claim large enough for an entirely new city. This tale is preserved in the central hill of Carthage, the Byrsa Hill, which in Greek translates to oxhide. Regardless of the veracity of the legend, archaeology seems to back up the idea that some of the earliest habitation in the area occurred around the vicinity of the Byrsa Hill. In these early years, a mix of residential and commercial buildings sprung up to occupy the space between the defensible acropolis and the emerging merchant port. Within these grounds would have also been a central agora for meetings and market activities, as well as numerous temples and public buildings. An early wall likely protected key parts of the burgeoning town, with evidence that around the 5th century BC, powerful fortifications were built along the seafront. But with the boons of a growing empire bearing fruit, little could stop the Carthaginian citizens from spilling out beyond its confines. As each new generation arose, they fueled a new wave of development across the lands. Fields, orchards, farmhouses, villas, water canals, roads, warehouses, workshops, stables, and more sprung up as far as the eye could see. Soon, even the ancestors, once laid to rest upon the nearby hills, were being encroached upon by their descendants. By the time of the Punic Wars in the 3rd century BC, Carthage had grown to an enormous size, covering much of the promontory and boasting a peak population estimated at 750,000 people. By now, its demographic makeup consisted of not just Phoenician immigrants, but also local Libyans, Numidians, Greeks, Italians, Iberians, Celts, and all manner of folk from the wider Mediterranean, which were drawn one way or another to the cosmopolitan metropolis. The city itself would have been broken out into a series of districts though their exact demarcations from this period largely elude us. For now, we can at least present some general areas of interest and spend some time visiting each one in turn. We can begin with the city's outer walls, of which there were two sets, the sea walls and the land walls. The former are considerably longer, stretching out over 25 kilometers. These appear to have been a line of sturdy stone walls, 10 meters tall and 5 meters thick, which were studded with towers for defense and observation. Access was granted to the outside by a series of gates, the most prominent of which were the Great Sea Gates. With dual passages, presumably for entry and exit, these likely saw the heaviest traffic. After all, they stood as one of the easiest ways to reach the shores from within Carthage and were thus a portal through which many merchants and fishermen commuted to work. But it is the land walls of Carthage which were the most impressive. While some defenses had likely existed on this flank for quite some time, they seem to have received a substantial upgrade around the end of the Greco-Punic Wars when Agathocles invaded in 310 BC. According to Appian quoting Polybius, they are said to have been made of 3 layers. Their exact nature is up to some interpretation, but comparing them to the remains of the nearby walled city of Thapsus gives us some better insight. Here you can see one possible diagram of these defenses, consisting of 3 paired sets of walls and ditches, which together span across the 5 kilometers of the isthmus's neck. To maintain fields of fire, the outermost barricade would have been the lowest and might have consisted of a simple stone curtain wall or a wooden palisade. Behind it was a more robust stone wall, at least 5 meters thick and perhaps a dozen meters tall. Behind it was yet another ditch and wall. This last defense stood 15 meters high and 10 meters thick and was punctuated every 60 meters by a 4-story tower. Beneath these walls, the Carthaginians built a number of stables, barracks, and storehouses, reportedly capable of housing 300 elephants, 4,000 horses, and 24,000 soldiers, as well as fodder for all of them. Just inside the walls of Carthage would have been its outer districts. The most prominent of these was the Megara. It was a massive, semi-rural expanse which Appian describes as follows. Quote, "It is planted with gardens and full of fruit-bearing trees divided off by low walls, hedges, and brambles, besides deep ditches full of water running in every direction." It was here that one would have been overwhelmed by the sights and smells of Carthage's extraordinary agricultural wonders. After all, these lands would have been tended to by not just some of the most skilled gardeners and arborists of Carthage, but also its wealthy citizens who were known to write some of the most renowned and extensive treatises on the subject in all of the ancient world. I will now quote from Diodorus Siculus, who seems to have had access to an eyewitness to such Punic landscapes. Quote, "The country was divided into gardens and plantations of every kind. There were also country houses, one after another, constructed in luxurious fashion and covered in stucco, which gave evidence of the wealth of the people who possessed them. The farm buildings were filled with everything that was needed for enjoyment. Part of the land was planted with vines, part yielded olives, and was also planted thickly with other varieties of fruit-bearing trees. On either side, herds of cattle and flocks of sheep pastured on the plain, and the neighboring meadows were filled with grazing herds. In general, there was a manifold prosperity in the region since the leading Carthaginians had laid out their private estates, and with their wealth, had beautified them for their enjoyment. The appeal of the Megara certainly seems evident. It is for this reason that those stuck in the more crowded regions of the inner city gradually made their way to its outskirts. In time, this movement reportedly began to form a new city to the north of Old Carthage, which may have been nestled somewhere in its northeastern hills. For now, let us travel in the opposite direction. We will pass over the old inner walls of the capital and head for its acropolis atop the Byrsa Hill. Here, the Carthaginians built a glorious temple to Eshmun, which was said to be the richest of their shrines. Its perimeter bristled with defenses, with primary access being restricted to a 60-flight grand staircase rising from the coastal plains below. Due to its commanding view of the city, it would be here that the Carthaginians would choose to make their final stand against the Roman invaders. On the gentle slopes of the Byrsa were residential districts which featured a slice of the social strata. The homes of the elite were likely higher up the hill in what was known as the Hannibal Quarter. Their elevated position brought with it the natural advantages of an improved view and fresher air. The latter was likely important, given the general practice in antiquity of running sewage through channels cut next to roads. To mitigate this though, it seems that in at least one instance, the structures in this area featured indoor plumbing. As to the designs of these wealthier residences, evidence suggests they were similar to their Roman counterparts with central courtyards and cisterns. The interiors would certainly have been splendidly decorated with mosaics, paintings, statues, and all manner of opulent possessions. Slightly lower down the hill tended to be the houses for the poor. Simpler homes would have been humble dwellings with flat-top roofs which made for a convenient place to cool off and hang laundry in the breeze. Along its exteriors would have been spaces to work, relax, and mingle with one's neighbors in an environment which would have been similar to many other communities across the Mediterranean. Inside would be a more private space which families would have molded to meet their needs and make them feel truly at home. This might include adorning the walls with hereditary decorations and a shrine with a favored deity. Over the years, some families may have even been able to climb up the social ladder, welcoming distinguished guests and tutors who might raise their children with dreams of ever greater achievements. Yet as in Rome, such advancement was a distant dream for the poor who were crammed into dense apartment blocks. There were many of these in Carthage, with the largest of them rising to a height of 6 stories in the Old City district. Archaeology indicates that navigating one's way around the Byrsa Hill would have been tricky in most places. So as to follow the terrain, streets tended to be thin and weaving, with only enough room for foot traffic rather than carts. However, there were key routes which made travel easier. These took the form of 3 large avenues which led down to the Agora below. For visitors, these would have offered one of the most impressive ways to witness the city. For invaders, though, they would prove to be funnels into killing fields, as the Romans discovered in their bloody fight up these streets flanked by apartments on their way to the acropolis. But let us now travel in peace to the heart of the city below. Its gravitational center was the great Agora of Carthage. It was here that people congregated for economic, social, or religious activity, and in all likelihood where politicians met and trials were conducted. For a literal taste of what might be on offer from the Great Agora, we will pass you on to our friend Max Miller, who can offer insight on a humble but famous Punic dish recorded by the Roman Cato.
Maybe as you make your way through a market of ancient Carthage, you'll see someone, a Carthaginian citizen, sitting down to a bowl of pulse punica, Carthaginian porridge, which is what I'm going to do right now. And here we are, pulse punica, the porridge of Carthage. So I gotta say, it's not the prettiest dish I've ever seen. Kind of looks like oatmeal and cottage cheese were mixed together, neither of which are pretty in and of themselves, but let's see how it tastes. I have to say, I don't know what I was expecting it to taste like, but it wasn't this. I've had pulses before. I made one for the Gladiator episode, and they're a lot more grain heavy. This one has a lot more cheese. It's 3 pounds of cheese for every 1 pound of grain, so of course it's a lot more cheese. And so it's more like a dessert pulse. With the honey in there, it's kind of sweet. It's actually really good. I actually drizzled a little bit more honey on there at the end, and I think that that's a good thing. Depends on if you want it really sweet or not, but it does kind of add a little bit more sweetness, but it's still not overly sweet, which is weird because a lot of ancient Roman recipes that use honey, it's a lot of honey that just ends up becoming the only flavor that you're eating, but this one, you're getting more of the cheese. The only thing I'm not really getting is the grain, and that's fine because it is mostly cheese. So this is definitely an ancient recipe worth trying. It's not a lot of work, a pretty simple dish, and worthwhile. But again, I would make a smaller portion like I did because you're not going to want a huge bowl of this. Unless, of course, you're feeding Hannibal's army, then go with the full amount.
Thanks, Max. Returning now to the Agora. In the vicinity were other important public buildings and temples dedicated to the likes of Reshef, Baal Saphon, and Melkart. Many of these temples were completely lost in the razing of Carthage and subsequent leveling of their acropolis, and thus only remain in references from literature. One religious site, however, which does survive in some form is the Tophet, which was a place of worship for Baal Hamon and Tanit, and which was the resting place for thousands of Carthaginian children. Scattered about were many other residential and commercial districts which were often intertwined. For instance, lucky Carthaginians might have run small shops connected to houses or apartment buildings from which they might operate a workshop, tavern, or restaurant. The city apparently had a flourishing metalworking industry, as blacksmiths and metalworking sites were abundant. Potters and artisans of all kinds also existed, as can be seen with the discovery of a jeweler's workshop which handled obsidian, coral, and semi-precious stones. But not all shops could be readily found in these centralized locations. The more disruptive trades, such as the tanners and the fullers, had to be located on the outskirts of town. With this understanding in mind, let us now turn to the final and perhaps most critical district of the flourishing imperial city, its primary naval port, known as the Cothon. It was actually composed of two parts, the outer commercial harbor and the inner military harbor, both of which were surrounded by numerous warehouses. The commercial harbor had likely existed in some form prior to this, which was expanded gradually over the years. By the time of Carthage's peak, it was large enough to anchor many dozens of vessels whose cargo would efficiently be loaded and offloaded by an army of dock workers. The goods passing through these facilities would have been truly impressive, both in scope and scale, with products from across the known world. The military harbor was just as impressive. Built rather late in Carthage's history, it was established with a singular purpose, to house the Maritime Empire's vaunted fleet. The structure was circular in nature, with massive walls that enclosed a ring of ship sheds. In the center was a man-made island with yet more sheds and the Admiral's Tower. It was from here that he might supervise the activities of the area, and in times of war, order the lowering of chains at the harbor entrance to seal it off from attack. This would be of utmost importance, as it was through the Cothon complex that the Romans would ultimately thrust their dagger in the final siege of Carthage. But such matters will have to wait for another time. For now, we hope you've appreciated our tour of the great city in its prime. A big thanks to Max for joining us in this video. Be sure to check out his amazing content, which offers a fresh perspective on how you can experience history. A big thanks is also owed to our patrons for supporting the channel. Consider becoming a member to catch script previews, get HD downloads of all our art, and participate in polls. A final thanks to our researchers, writers, and artists for making this episode possible. We couldn't have done it without this team or this community. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like and subscribe for more content, and check out these other related videos. See you in the next one.